My parents sold the antique piano. My grandmother left me for $250,000 and used the cash to buy my sister a luxury car. They did it while Grandma was in hospice, thinking she was too sick to notice. But when I told her, she didn't cry. She just picked up the phone and said 7 words that destroyed everything they thought they owned. It's time for them to meet my attorney. Before I tell you what happened when the FBI crashed my sister's engagement party, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. To understand why I didn't scream when the FBI eventually kicked down the doors, you have to go back to the day the music died. 4 weeks ago. I had just returned to Greenwich after a 3-month tour in Vienna. My name is Valerie. And at 29, I've spent my life trying to turn the noise of this family into something harmonious. I'm a chamber musician, a cellist, specifically, and for years, I believed that if I just played perfectly enough, my parents would finally hear me. I was wrong. I walked into the estate, dragging my suitcase, expecting silence. Instead, I heard the sound of sledgehammers. The noise was coming from the west wing. My wing. I dropped my bags and ran down the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I reached the double doors of my recording studio, the soundproof sanctuary I had built with my own savings, I froze. It was gone. The acoustic paneling was ripped from the walls. The vintage microphones were piled in a heap of twisted metal in the corner. The floor was covered in drywall, dust, and debris. Standing in the middle of the destruction was my father, Marcus, holding a glass of scotch and pointing at a wall. "Widen that archway," he told a contractor. "Shelby needs space for the shoe display." "Dad?" The word barely left my throat. He turned slowly, looking at me with the same mild annoyance one might have for a fly in the room. "You're back early. What are you doing?" I stepped over a piece of my crushed cello stand. "Where is the equipment? Where is the Steinway?" My grandmother's piano. A 1920 Steinway Model B. It wasn't just an instrument. It was the only voice I had in this house. It was the one thing Grandma Josephine had explicitly told me was mine. "Sold it," Marcus said, taking a sip of his drink. The room spun. You sold it? Got $250,000 cash for it this morning. A Russian collector. He didn't ask questions, paid up front. "That wasn't yours to sell," I screamed, the shock finally giving way to rage. "Grandma left that to me. That piano is worth millions, not 200 grand. And you sold it for quick cash?" Marcus stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of expensive scotch and stale desperation radiated off him. His face wasn't apologetic. It was twisted with a sudden, ugly sneer. "Wake up, Valerie," he spat. "Shelby is marrying into the Harrison family next month. Do you know what that means? It means billions. She needs a walk-in closet that looks the part. She needs a wedding that screams old money. So you stole from me?" "I liquidated dead weight," he interrupted, his voice dropping to a growl. "I sold that pile of firewood to a Russian collector because we need liquidity. You should thank me. Your trash music won't get Shelby a billionaire husband. It won't pay my debts. You are a hobby, Valerie. Shelby is the investment." I looked at him, and for the first time in 29 years, the fog lifted. I didn't see my father. I didn't see a man under pressure. I saw a predator. Psychologists call it the Saturn complex, the father who devours his own children out of fear that they will surpass him. Marcus had tried to be a musician in his 20s and failed. He had tried to be a businessman and was currently drowning in debt. And here I was, actually making a living with my art. Actually succeeding where he had stumbled. He didn't sell the piano because he needed the money. He sold it because he hated that I could play it and he couldn't. He destroyed my studio not to build a closet, but to break my hands. He was eating his child to feed his starving ego. He waited for me to cry. He waited for me to beg or collapse, just like I always did when he raised his voice. I swallowed the scream building in my chest. I looked at the empty rectangular spot on the floor where the piano used to be. "You're right," I said, my voice hollow. Marcus blinked, surprised by my surrender. He smirked, swirling his drink. "Good. Glad you're finally seeing reason. Now get out of here. The contractors have work to do." I turned and walked out of the rubble. I didn't go to my room. I went to my car. I drove 2 miles down the road to a scenic overlook, parked the car, and screamed until my throat tasted like blood. Then, I picked up my phone. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called the storage facility in Zurich where I kept my actual assets, the ones Marcus didn't know about. He thought he had broken me. He had no idea he had just freed me. I stood there in the wreckage of my studio, staring at the empty space where the piano had been. A normal daughter would have kept screaming. A normal victim would have called the police right then and there to report the theft. But I stopped being a normal daughter the moment I saw the glee in my father's eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I forced my breathing to slow down, turning the panic into something colder, sharper. Marcus was watching me, swirling the ice in his glass, waiting for the breakdown. He wanted the satisfaction of seeing me shattered. He wanted to confirm that he held the power, that my happiness was something he could buy or sell on a whim. He didn't know about Zurich. 5 years ago, just after I signed my first major recording contract, Grandma Josephine pulled me aside. She was already losing her mobility then, but her mind was a steel trap. Your father sees assets, not art, she had whispered. If you love something, Valerie, move it where he can't reach it. I had listened. I hired a specialized logistics team to move the authentic 1920 Steinway Model B, the one valued at over $10 million due to its provenance and condition, to a climate-controlled vault in Switzerland. In its place, I had put a stencil piano, a generic, hollow shell I picked up from an estate sale for $500. I paid a restorer to slap a convincing decal on the fallboard and polish the wood until it shined. It looked like a Steinway. It took up space like a Steinway. But to anyone with a trained ear, it sounded like a tin can. Marcus, the failed musician, hadn't played a note in 20 years. He didn't know the difference. But the Russian collector who just paid $250,000 in cash? He would know. He would know the second he tried to tune it. My father hadn't just stolen from me. He had defrauded a dangerous organization for $250,000. He had taken money from people who didn't file lawsuits, they broke kneecaps. I looked at him. Really looked at him. If I told him the truth now, he would panic. He would try to get the piano back, refund the money, and save his own skin. He would survive. But looking at the smashed drywall, the physical manifestation of his hatred for me, I decided he didn't deserve to survive. He deserved the consequences of his own greed. I wiped my face, careful to smudge my mascara just enough to look defeated. I let my shoulders slump. You really got $250,000 for it? I asked, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. Cash, Marcus bragged, mistaking my calculation for resignation. Money is already in the safe. Going to the wedding planner tomorrow. Shelby is going to have flowers flown in from Holland. Okay, I whispered. He frowned, suspicious of how quickly the fight had left me. Okay? You're right, Dad, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I was being selfish. Shelby is the future of this family. She deserves the best wedding possible. If selling the piano guarantees that, then I guess it's worth it. A slow, arrogant smile spread across his face. He believed it. He believed it because he needed to believe I was weak. He needed to believe he had won. Finally, he scoffed, finishing his drink. I knew you'd come around. Clean this mess up. We have guests coming this weekend. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. He thought he had just funded the wedding of the century. He didn't realize he had just signed his own death warrant. I waited until he was gone. Then I stepped over the debris, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. I didn't start cleaning. I opened a new folder titled, The Harrison Gala. If he was willing to sell a fake piano to the mob, I wondered what else he would be willing to sign if he thought he was winning. It was time to find out. 1 week later, the air in the mansion was thick enough to choke on. The wedding planners were demanding deposits. The florist had tripled her quote. And Shelby was throwing tantrums because the imported orchids weren't the right shade of ivory. But I wasn't watching Shelby. I was watching Marcus. He was pacing in his study, a phone pressed to his ear, his voice a hushed, frantic hiss. I need more time. The liquidity is tied up in assets. Yes, the house is unencumbered. Next week. I promise. He slammed the phone down when he saw me standing in the doorway. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot. The $250,000 from the fake piano was already gone, burned on deposits. Jewelry for Shelby. And, I suspected, interest payments on debts he hadn't told anyone about. What do you want? He snapped, shuffling papers on his desk to hide the past due notices. I found something, I said, my voice quiet and submissive. I held up a blue legal folder. In Grandma's safe. I think she wanted you to have it. Marcus narrowed his eyes. What is it? She signed it 3 years ago. I lied smoothly. Before the stroke. Before she got locked in. I placed the folder on the desk. He snatched it up, flipping it open. I watched his eyes scan the header. Durable power of attorney. He didn't read the fine print. He didn't look at the paragraph explicitly stating this was a springing power of attorney. A document that only became valid upon proof of incapacitation certified by 2 independent physicians. Without those affidavits, the document was worthless paper. Using it to secure a loan or transfer assets was a felony. It gives you control, I said, feeding his greed. Over the estate. Over the house. You can use the property as collateral for the wedding costs. It's what she would have wanted, right? For the family legacy? Marcus looked at the document, then at me. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. He didn't see a legal trap. He saw a lifeline. He saw $5 million in equity he could drain to pay off the sharks circling him. Finally, he breathed, clutching the folder like a holy relic. I knew she signed this. I knew she trusted me. He looked at me with a mix of pity and triumph. You see, Valerie? This is how the real world works. You handle the art. I handle the empire. Now get out. I have calls to make. I turned to leave, but I paused at the door. Dad? What? Make sure you file it before the engagement gala. You want the Harrisons to know you're solvent, right? Obviously, he scoffed. I'm signing the loan papers on stage during the toast. It's going to be a power move. I walked out of the study and closed the heavy oak door. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. There is a concept in military strategy called the art of deadly silence. When your enemy is making a fatal mistake, you don't interrupt them. You don't argue. You don't fight back. You get out of the way and let gravity do the work. For years, I thought fighting back meant screaming louder than him. I thought it meant proving I was right. But standing in that hallway, listening to him dial the private equity lenders with the number I had conveniently left visible on the desk, I realized the truth. The most effective revenge isn't a battle. It's an assisted suicide. I hadn't just given him a document. I had given him the rope. All I had to do now was wait for him to kick away the chair. The engagement gala was a masterpiece of old money theater. My father had rented the ballroom at the Greenwich Country Club and filled it with enough imported orchids to bankrupt a small nation. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the distinct, metallic scent of fresh money. Shelby was holding court in the center of the room, her hand extended so the light from the chandeliers would hit the diamond. It was a massive, gaudy stone paid for. I knew. By the Russian mob's cash. She looked beautiful. And completely hollow. It's perfect, isn't it? She gushed to a circle of bridesmaids as I walked by. Daddy said, the Harrisons are going to be so impressed. I didn't stop. I walked to the edge of the room, clutching a glass of sparkling water. I felt like a ghost haunting my own funeral. Every person here, the bankers, the socialites, the Harrisons, they all looked at me with that polite, pitying smile reserved for the unsuccessful sister. Then, the music stopped. Marcus tapped a spoon against his champagne flute, stepping onto the low stage. He looked triumphant. The gray pallor from last week was gone, replaced by the flush of adrenaline. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed, amplified by the microphone. Thank you for joining us to celebrate Shelby and William. But before we toast the happy couple, I have a small announcement. He scanned the crowd until his eyes locked on me. He waved me over. Valerie, come up here. My stomach turned. This wasn't in the plan. I hesitated. But the spotlight swung toward me, pinning me against the wall. I had to play the part. I had to be the submissive daughter one last time. I walked up the steps. Marcus wrapped a heavy arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. He smelled of scotch and victory. I want to thank my eldest daughter, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. For years, Valerie has been finding herself, chasing her little artistic dreams. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the room. But this week, Marcus continued, tightening his grip. She finally stepped up. She realized that family legacy is more important than a hobby. She helped secure the assets that made tonight possible. She finally knows her place in this family. He looked down at me, his eyes gleaming with malice. He was publicly claiming ownership of me. He was telling the world he had broken the wild horse. To Valerie, he toasted. For finally being useful. To Valerie, the crowd echoed. I stood there, humiliated and furious, ready to smash his glass and expose him as a thief. Instead, I forced a tight smile. Enjoy it, Dad, I thought. This is your last breath as a free man. And now, Marcus announced, gesturing to a table beside the stage. Two men in dark suits waited with documents, private equity lenders, sharks in silk ties. To secure this family's future, I'm finalizing a partnership to expand our holdings. It was pure theater for the in-laws. Marcus sat, uncapped a heavy fountain pen, and opened the folder I'd handed him. He placed the springing power of attorney on the table like collateral, never checking for the doctor's signatures. Then he signed the loan documents, pledging the Greenwich estate property he didn't own to a debt he couldn't repay. Scratch. Scratch. The pen sounded louder than the applause. Marcus shook hands with the lenders, grinning as if he'd just won. He thought he'd secured $5 million. He didn't know he'd just committed federal wire fraud in front of 200 witnesses. I stepped back into the shadows and texted attorney Walter, waiting in a van outside. It's done. The transfer cleared in 45 seconds. The lead lender checked his tablet. A green light flashed. Funds received, Mr. Thompson. $5 million. Marcus exhaled like he'd been drowning for weeks. He stood taller, buttoned his tux, and raised his glass. To the future. To the future. The room echoed. Then the lights flickered. The massive screen behind him, still showing Shelby's childhood photos, went black. Static hummed through the speakers. Guests whispered. Shelby snapped toward the AV booth. Fix it. The screen flared back to life. Not a photo, a video. Date stamped last week. My father's study. On-screen Marcus paced with the blue legal folder in his hand, snarling into the phone. His voice blasted through the ballroom speakers, unmistakable. I don't care what the fine print says. The old hag is basically dead. I'll forge the doctor's signatures if I have to. Once I collateralize the house, the $5 million is ours. The room froze. Total silence. On stage, the real Marcus went ghost white. His champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered like a gunshot. Turn it off, he screamed. It's a deepfake. It's AI. Nobody moved. Shelby's billionaire in-laws stared at him in horror. Then the double doors burst open. 6 agents in windbreakers stamped with 3 yellow letters FBI strode in. Walter walked with them, grim and satisfied. Marcus Thompson, the lead agent called. Voice calm but absolute. Step away from the table. Hands where we can see them. Marcus backed into the podium, stammering. You can't be here, this is a private event. We have a federal warrant for your arrest, the agent said, advancing. Wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. This is a mistake. Marcus pointed at the lenders, who were already scrambling to pack up. I have the power of attorney. My mother signed it. Walter stepped forward. It was a springing power of attorney, Marcus. It required 2 physicians' affidavits of incapacitation. You didn't get them. You forged them. And you just used a fraudulent instrument to wire $5 million across state lines. He lifted a file. We tracked the transaction in real time. The second the funds hit your account, you committed a federal felony. Shelby screamed a sharp, broken sound. She grabbed William Harrison's arm, but he ripped away as if she were poison. The Harrison family didn't argue or explain. They signaled their security and executed a clean retreat toward the exits. William! Shelby cried, chasing them. Wait! He never looked back. I watched from the corner as the empire collapsed in under 3 minutes. Wealth, status, old money. Pride gone the moment the handcuffs clicked. Marcus didn't look at the agents. He searched the crowd for rescue until his eyes landed on me. I stood in the shadows, sipping water, not even surprised. And he understood. I hadn't surrendered. I hadn't helped him. I had executed him. Still fighting, he shouted. Wait, I still have assets. I have the $250,000 from the piano. I can post bail. He stared at me like that money was his last lifeline. So I stepped forward. The crowd parted, uneasy and silent. Even the agents paused, sensing the weight of what was coming. You don't have anything, Dad, I said softly. I sold it, he snapped. Cash. $250,000. I leaned close enough for him to smell the fear on himself. The piano you sold was a stencil, Marcus. A counterfeit. I bought it for $500 at an estate sale and refinished it to look real. His eyes widened. The real one. 1920 Steinway Model B? I continued, ice in my voice. It's been locked in a climate-controlled vault in Zurich for 5 years. Grandma and I moved it the day I signed my first contract. No, he whispered. Impossible. You sold a fake to the Russian mob for $250,000, I said, clean and final. You didn't just defraud them. You humiliated them. And when they find out, and they will, prison will be the safest place you've got. His face drained so completely he looked dead. His knees buckled, and the agents had to hold him upright. Valerie, he choked. You can't help me. I did help you, I said, stepping back. I gave you what you wanted. Control. And look what you did with it. I turned away. I didn't watch them drag him out. I didn't watch Shelby sobbing in her ruined designer dress. I didn't look for my mother hiding somewhere. I walked straight out. Outside. The air was cool and clean. Walter waited by my car, an understated sedan I'd bought with my own money. It's done, he said. Assets frozen. The house returns to the trust immediately. Your grandmother's being transferred to the private facility in Switzerland. The real piano is already there. Think the private. Already there. Thank you, Walter. He studied me. What will you do now? I looked up at the stars above Greenwich. For the first time, the sky didn't feel heavy. I'm going to play, I said. For real this time. I got in, drove away, and didn't speed. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I deleted Marcus's number, then Shelby's, then my mother's. One by one, precise and calm, like a surgeon removing a tumor. I was 29. No parents, no sister, no family home. But as I merged onto the highway toward the airport and a flight to Zurich, I realized the only thing that mattered. I was free. And if you've ever had to be the villain in someone else's story just to survive your own, hit like and subscribe. You aren't crazy. You're just free.